Onto this now. President Cyril Ramaphosa will have to explain South Africa's land policy when he meets his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump this week or next week. This will be the first in-person meeting since Trump took office in January for a second term. Now, relations between Pretoria and Washington hit rock bottom with Trump persistently making unsubstantiated claims of a genocide against white South Africans. Newzroom Afrika's Malungelo Booi has more.
Terrible things are happening in South Africa. The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things. So that's under investigation right now. We'll make a determination. And until such time as we find out what South Africa is doing, they're taking away land, they're confiscating land, and actually they're doing things that are perhaps far worse than that.
This was US President Donald Trump shortly after taking office this year. He had been reacting to South Africa's Expropriation Act of 2024, which allows the state to take privately owned property for public use. The act includes provisions for equitable compensation in some specific cases, but not in others. Despite Trump's repeated claims about farm seizures and genocides against whites, there's no data to support that such acts have ever happened in post-apartheid South Africa.
When President Trump says that land is being confiscated from white farmers in South Africa, he is not referring to any particular case. In fact, there are no cases of such confiscation in South Africa. And certainly there's no evidence that among the 59 white South Africans who were given a ticket out and arrived in Washington recently, that any of them were farmers who had had their land taken. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. Similarly, there's no evidence of a genocide against white people, let alone white farmers in South Africa. So I think that what we're dealing with here is not so much a set of facts that need to be corrected, but the fact that this is a fact-free kind of conversation that's happening.
Here's how the land picture looks like. The total land surface in South Africa is over 122 million hectares. A 2017 government land audit showed out of 37 million hectares of farms and agricultural holdings, 72% of these were owned by white people, followed by colored people at 15%, while black people owned less than 5%.
The audit was done as a research project. It is not comprehensive. There are holes in it. What I can tell you is that as of 1994, we know that of the 87% of the land that fell outside the former Bantustans, quite a fair section of that is owned by the state. But of the land that was held under private ownership, mostly by white families or companies, about 11% of the commercial farmland has been redistributed since the early 90s, right? So in about 30 years, we can say about 11% of the commercial farmland has been redistributed, either because black people had land claims or there's been a process of general redistribution. Some of that land has been lost again because people got into debt to banks and it was repossessed, including from the land bank. But overall, you know, anyone walking around South Africa only has to open their eyes to see that most people who own land in this country, especially agricultural land, are wealthy. Not all of them are wealthy, but increasingly it's actually private companies, including transnational companies. It's not only South African capital, it's not only families.
In fact, Hall says government has over the past 30 years been very hesitant to tackle the issue of land expropriation.
The irony is that many people who've been struggling for land have been calling on the government to confiscate land or expropriate with or without compensation. And the state has been steadfastly refusing to do so. So the irony here is the South African state faces a situation where people on the ground are calling for it to take more radical action. It's refusing to do so, and yet is being punished diplomatically, despite not having taken those steps. And I think, you know, what is happening here is partly South Africa being punished for our geopolitical positioning, for our position on the war in Gaza, where there is in fact a genocide, being punished for our alignment with the BRICS countries, So I think that, you know, there is a wider issue at stake here. It's not actually about farmers. I don't think that President Trump really cares that much about farmers. What he does care about is white opinion in America.
So how then should the president address this issue in his meeting with President Trump?
I don't think that coming with a lot of facts to show that President Trump is incorrect, which of course one could, is going to win the day. I think that if we see the recent meetings with President Zelensky from Ukraine, Prime Minister Carney from Canada, what wins the day with President Trump is not so much coming with facts, analysis, or robust argument, but rather, you know, just seeing what you can win on the day. I think that President Ramaphosa is well known as a master negotiator. So I suspect that he will not challenge President Trump head on with facts. But I think we should. I think that is the role of South Africans to promote the counter-narrative and to challenge what is clearly fake news that is now not just being peddled on dodgy websites or on social media, but directly from the office of the most powerful, politician in the world.
Land remains a contentious issue in contemporary South Africa, and government sees the controversial Expropriation Act of 2022 as one of the key instruments in land redress. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Malungelo Booi in Johannesburg.